It seems I have a really bad habit for rebuying figures. Here's a look at the NECA toys. The Nun Retro Cloth Nun Valak. A priest with a haunted past and a novice on the threshold of her final vows are sent by the Vatican to investigate the death of a young nun in Romania and confront a malevolent force in the form of a demonic nun. Now, just before we get things underway for this rather unholy nun, let's grab first the tape measure and see how tall the retro cloth Nun Valak stands. You know, it's funny that I actually would say standing. That's one of the biggest problems I have with this figure. Really loose feet. We're going to talk more about that in a moment. In the meantime, though, the tape measure tells us that the figure is almost 8 inches in height, just a little short of that, or the figure is going to be, in this case, about 20 centimeters tall. While the following figure comparison may not make much sense to some of you, if you had seen my review, though, of my recently looked at Shudder series Creepshow Creep a Second Go-Around, remember in that review I did talk about there was a couple of figures that unfortunately became casualties of tiny little hands that got their hands on them. Well, needless to say, I didn't end up having a broken Creepshow Creep, and I think in fact, the other Valak that I had in my collection before suffered even worse of a fate. Several joints were broken completely off the figure, well past the point of even being able to salvage it. So just recently, in fact, I did pick up the Creep, and along with that order, I did end up picking up Valak. I thought it would be also fitting to the fact that these guys would both be going on the shelf together again, that I'd also bring him in for a comparison of the two. Rolling around by the figure's feet, the figure comes included with an alternate head sculpt, and that really makes up the majority of all the accessories. I kind of think that it would have been a requirement that the figure could have come included with a little painting. Yeah, of course, that could have been something that could have been included. But ultimately, though, in this case, we only get an alternate head sculpt that features a very angry, screaming Valak. Of course, Valak here, played by Bonnie Aarons, something about skinny actresses that end up playing really creepy roles. Between her and Alison Sutherland, that was an Evil Dead Rise. I seem to have a thing for them. Needless to say, though, we do get ourselves not the prettiest looking Bonnie Aarons, but again, you've got a lot of makeup there on her, and of course, she's got all these cool little veins growing and jetting their way out from her eyes, and the top of her forehead also there as well. This head sculpt, by the way, obviously can be swapped out with the existing head sculpt. Simply just a case of popping and replacing them. We will talk about more of this in a moment. Obviously, I will be swapping the head sculpt off. I did want to spin this all the way around so you can kind of see, like, there's a lot of cool details that will be lost by the fact that the veil attaches onto the head. And to say attaching, I use that term very, very loosely. Let's put that down here for a second. Picking the figure up, there are two main problems I have with this Valak. And it might very well have been the problems I have with the other figure, although I don't recall the ankles being as loose as the ones that I did get this time around. The ankles are very loose, to the point where I had a real tough time, and still continue to have a tough time moving the ankles, or even having the figure to stand, because the ankles tend to cause the figure to buckle forward. I might see if I can actually go in there and fix this up. Not glue it, obviously. I wouldn't want to have that as a permanent fix, but I would probably go in there maybe with like floor polish or some way to tighten up the joint, just so I could have the ankles a little tighter than what they are right now. This is probably more obscene to be looking at this nun looking like this. One thing I did want to talk about, by the fact of having the skirt or the veil lifted up, it's not the veil, the skirting lifted up like this, is that you can kind of see by the fabric that they use, this black material, that it has left behind some stains. Normally that would be an issue. Well, obviously it's not going to be an issue anyways, because it drapes so far down, even almost to the point where the feet are anyways, that you're never going to be any bit the wiser, unless it was people like me that took the time to lift this up and show you just how much staining has left behind on the plastic. Either that, or they just didn't paint it all the way completely, because of course, for the same reasons, you're never going to be able to see it anyways, because that sits over top of her legs. But even if that was the case and you would have visible legs, I mean, really, in some sense, it does kind of have the same sort of veinage that's all across his face as well. So in a way, kind of as a happy accident, as Bob Ross would always say, it sort of does match it kind of quite conveniently, even though that wasn't probably the plan in place in the first place. The other problem I really also have with this figure involves the veil. The veil should really just sit on the head, and I guess in some ways it does, but it doesn't sit well. The problem with it, though, is there's a wire that's built into this, so you can kind of bend this if you want to have different poses for it. But the biggest problem is it never really sits properly on the head. anytime to put this on the head, you'll see right away it starts to slide back on Valak's head. Not to the point, obviously, where it's going to be falling off, but it never seems to sit properly. And I think even my other Valak had that same sort of issue. Spin this also around, though, as well. The way they've actually pinched the middle of it and they've sewn it sort of causes a little bit of problem to be raking on the inside of the figure's veil. Like, just to look at it right now, you can kind of see, like, it's obviously sewn right in the middle, so you can't spread this out. And like where it naturally folds in on itself sort of ends up causing a little bit of a bump where it doesn't sit naturally against the figure's body. So of course then, when you're putting it on top of the figure's head like this, it never really sits far enough forward, I feel. Like, I always feel like I'm fighting with the veil, even to put it on and think that I have it in a good place. The veil, as you can see, always ends up pushing itself off to the side. Maybe the veil has even possessed itself. To quickly lift the veil off for right now to show you what the head sculpt looks like for the other Valak. This obviously is just a more neutral expression, but show you the difference between the two. I prefer myself, I think, even when I had the other one prior to it being broken, I did have the figure displayed with this head sculpt. And I suppose if I was to go back, and I think even right now I have that other Valak sitting in a tote somewhere, I probably could easily just salvage it. I mean, obviously I said that the things were broken on it. I think the shoulder was broken, the elbow was broken. I mean, she really went to town destroying this thing. She probably thought it was possessed, and I can't blame her. I probably could either go in there and just kind of lift the sleeve up and probably just glue all the things in place that were broken in the first place and just, then swap out the heads. Might just end up doing that. That way I could have the figure displayed in two different ways. For the problems that I have with the veil and the problems I have with the ankles, they're both superior looking head sculpts. And I feel, in fact, by getting a newer version of this, not to say it's a reissue, but I feel like the paint is a lot better than the one that I had before. I really should go and find that other one in the tote. Again, I like this head sculpt, but I think that this is also a very worthy candidate if you decide to display it with this one instead. By doing it this route, you obviously have the benefit of having the more discolored teeth and the interior tongue that would be lost by using this head sculpt. Both of them also do have, again, like the wrappings around the back of the head, just to show you guys what that looks like on the back there. Yeah, again, it's a really nicely sculpted head sculpt. I have no complaints whatsoever with what NECA has done to Valak here. I just kind of wish like the construction of the body was a little bit better than what it is. If you don't want to change out the head, for example, just sort of as best you can hold on to the coif, I believe they pronounce it, and we're just going to pop that off the ball joint. And of course, we're going to then grab the other head and we're going to pop that back into place. Head sculpt changing is not an issue whatsoever. You might find, for example, like the collar piece sits a little too close to the head and it's kind of almost more of a fuller material. Like, I probably would have maybe pulled this back a little bit. I guess you can kind of tuck this underneath the head of Valak if you wanted to, but it does bunch up quite a bit. It's Velcroed, so really you could unvelcro this if you want to, but not by having, if you don't have this collar piece on top of the actual outfit that she's wearing, it does look a little out of place. I keep calling this a her instead of a he, but just to, again, show you what the veil then looks like. Swapping out the heads not necessarily doesn't fix the problem. You can also obviously pinch this towards the face, but I always kind of prefer to have the veil a little bit more wider instead on either side. I kind of wish in a way that they could have actually put like a little peg or something right there. I think what I might just end up doing is taking a little bit of double-sided tape, put a little bit of tape on the top there. I hope it wouldn't damage the paint, but even if it did, just enough that it would keep the veil in place. Because to have it like right there ideally would be the perfect place. But like the veil always seems to want to, you can even see it right now, it shifts its way back until eventually falling off the figure's head. As for the rest of the figure's body, we're just going to leave the veil off for right now. To lift this up, obviously what you're not going to see is a crucifix. But what you do get instead, though, is a belt. The belt kind of feels like it's more of a felt material, while the majority of really the dress that she wears as well, I think actually is a nice material that they've used. It does have, again, a little bit of bunching here on the back, but like the tailoring, the sew work that they've actually done to this, little tiny tailors, I'm sure, probably would have sewn this dress. It does actually look really good. She does have, again, like the additional pieces that kind of go over top of this on the front here. But it's, again, it's an overall nice looking. My biggest concern is not necessarily the outfits, nor is it really the head. In both the cases, I think they actually deliver really good. My biggest problem really is just, again, like the ankles are just really loose on at least this figure. I can only say for the figure that I have, you might very well have picked up a Valak and had no problems whatsoever with the ankles. But like mine are a little on the looser side. And again, I just kind of wish like the veil could have attached a little bit better onto the head than what it does right now. It just barely sits on there. I'm probably going to take a little bit of double-sided tape though. For the figure's articulation, I'm just going to leave this off for right now. running through it right now. The head is on a ball joint. So even though he is really wearing a nun's habit here. I mean, really, like, the outfit itself doesn't necessarily limit the articulation. You'll kind of see what I mean. Like, so the head does rock back and forth, up and down. So all the same stuff as normal retro cloth figures. The arms do come out. The thing about the arms, though, is the arms are very thin, though. Very, very lanky looking arms. You can see there's only a single hinge here. And the hinge is very loose here, even on the elbows as well. The hands rotate also all the way around. One thing I like to do, and I even did at the beginning of this review, is sort of have the fingers together. Well, the problem with that, too, is that with a single hinge only being there, anytime you bring the hands together, the hands seem to just want to fight their way and push themselves away from each other. What you can do is sort of a cheat, is you can take the fingers and lock them in with one another. So that's sort of one way to keep the arms together, if that's a route you wanted to go instead. The figure's waist is on a swivel, so it rotates back and forth. By the way, in case you are wondering, even though Valak is technically a male demon, there is technically a female body underneath this, just in case you're curious. Probably the same female body that they would have used for characters like Laurie Strode, for example. Again, like, just to bear with me, just to lift this up just a little bit. You can split the legs here on Valak. You can bring the legs forward. I'm sure this is taking them right off. Bring the legs back. There's only a single hinge in the knee, and then there's, again, the articulation in the ankle. Because, again, this is an older retro cloth figure, what it will lack, unfortunately, is it doesn't have an ankle pivot, for example. It only moves up and down. And even then, to say that, it moves up and down, and it's just, unfortunately, on mine, just a little on the looser side. Some of these things, the things that I expressed concerns for in this review, I can probably even fix. I think, like the ankle, for example, I probably could go in there with maybe floor polish, or, I don't know, maybe even... trying to think of anything else I could probably use. If you guys can think of something I could use for thickening up the joints, feel free to let me know down below in the comment section. But even, again, like, to have this standing, he has a real tough time to stand. And then, of course, the problem with that is then to try to take the veil and put it over top of the head and keep it in place. Ultimately, it always sort of looks like it's out of place, like the veil isn't properly sitting on top of Valak's head. Again, taking taking the roots of maybe adding, like, double-sided tape. Double-sided tape may be a little unsightly, may potentially run the risk of removing some of the paint on top of his head, but I might just end up doing it to prevent the veil from falling off even further than what it is right now. Going back and checking the old archive, sure enough, the last and only time that we had a look at the retro cloth Nun Valak here on this channel was 3 years ago. The lot number of the one I just picked up is 2021, so you do the math. That's a 2-year difference between the first time I got this Valak and the one that we got now, and through that, I don't think some considerable changes have been made, but I think they still have improved upon the paint. I don't think the faces were as good as what we get here, but again, I would probably have to go back and find that other Valak that's right now, as we speak, inside of a bag with all the limbs detached. I think the arm is one arm is broken off completely at the shoulder. I think the other arm is broken at the elbow. Still, I could probably go in and fix it, and I might just ultimately fix it. I don't mind that one is one that I can't really move too much of, because I might just ultimately have one figure displayed with the screaming face, as you'll see here in the final looks of this figure, and I'll have the other one with just the neutral expression. Either way, though, it's a nice looking Valak. It just has a few little issues, obviously all expressed in this review. The biggest ones being the veil not sitting properly on the top of the head. And then the other one, mileage may vary as to whether your figure is going to have similar issues. But on mine, at least, I can only say I have loose ankles. Hopefully I can fix the ankles, and hopefully I can also fix the veil. The veil might be not one it's going to be the easiest of the fixes. I'm simply just going to take a little bit of tape, I think, and stick it on the underside of the veil, and that might be enough just to prevent it from moving around. It doesn't surprisingly look as bad on the screaming face, but it looks a little bit more like it falls off the head when I was using the other head sculpt. What do you guys think of the Nun Valak? Let me know down below in the comments section. And have you ever had something in your collection that someone else has gotten a hold of and ultimately broken in the process? I know it's sad stories to be sharing, but if you have had a similar story to that, let me know down below in the comments section. It didn't have to even necessarily be small, tiny little hands like my story, but if you've ever had somebody that actually got a hold of your figure and broke it, I'm sure by accident, let me know down below in the comments section. Also, as well, if you've never had the chance to pick up Nun Valak for yourself and you'd like to get your hands on Valak, he is available as of right now over on Entertainment Earth. That's where I ended up finding this one, and I did end up finding it the same time that I picked up the Shudder series Creep, the figure we've already had a look at here on this channel. If you guys are interested, you can click the link down below. And also, by clicking that link, by the way, not only will it take you, beeline it directly to Valak, but then using that link will take you 10% off. We'll take 10% off anything that you find on their site that's currently in stock. So feel free to pick up Valak for yourself and pick up of other things, a couple of other things over there also as well. If you guys enjoyed this video, I want to hit with a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing, and you certainly do want to stick around for more, make sure if you haven't already done so that you hit that subscribe button down below and that you're also turning on the bell notification. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.